Make a start. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so we just did the sugya of the different amounts of time a person is in a city and that obligates them to participate in various responsibilities towards the needy, basically. We said there are different lengths of time because there are differences between in terms of the level of obligation in the city, right? There are differences between what that level of obligation is depending on how long you've been there or whatever. One of the things that we talked about though was the fact that we said that nowadays it's generally understood to be 30 days in any event. Yeah, even though the Gemora gives different measurements, different lengths of time. Nowadays it's usually 30 days. You've been there for 30 days. That's how long then you're obligated. Then you're mechuyev to do all these things, right? So we're up to Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Yeah. Let me just fix this second. One second.
Where is this, Rabbi? Which stuff?
1 minute. I'm coming. Sorry.
That's Amud Aleph.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry, I should have said the duff. Yeah, sorry. We're Ches Amud Aleph, and we are 6 lines or 7 lines. The end of the 7th line from the end of the Amud on Ches Amud Aleph. V'Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. That's where we're up to. Rabbi Asi and Rabbi Yochanan, right? Hakol lepasei ho'er. Everyone has to participate in the pasei ho'er. And we said that is the pasei ho'er were the, what's it called? One they were 1 second. The pasei, yeah, that's right. They were pieces of wood that strengthened the gates of the city. Everyone has to participate in that. Even the orphans, they have to. Everyone, even orphans, because everyone needs that protection, right? Rabbanon loy, but the Rabbanon not. Because we have this klal, as we mentioned a few times, the Rabbanon do not require protection. It's a simple calculation in the sense that when we're talking about certain things that are that you can only obligate someone to participate in something that they need, the Rabbanon are taken as not requiring that protection, and therefore, as a result, they don't have to participate in it. Omar Rav Papa says l'shura or l'parsha. Rav Papa says when it comes to shura and parsha, what is shura and parsha? Shura and parsha is so if you look at Rashi towards the end of the Amud, just a few lines up, l'shura is l'tikun ha'chayma, to fix the wall, and l'parsha is the parish is a horseman. Parish arechiv sevivois ho'ir. Somebody rides around the city, a shomra, they used to appoint a watchman, a guardian used to take his horse around the city, and basically would protect the city. So the shur la parshor la tarzino, and the tarzino, last Rashi, shomek klei zayin shel bnei oer yoshib v'vayis eitzel hashar. So he's the one who basically has the armory. Yes, he is the armorer. So I think that's probably the right word. Shomek klei zayin shel bnei oer yoshib v'vayis. He sits in a little house next to the gate of the city, and he protects the weapons. If they need to go out and defend themselves, they are ready. So all these things, afilu miyasme, they come even from orphans as well. But the Rabbanon do not require protection. Same thing. Klala de milsa. Now the klal is, how does it work? What is this based on? Kol milsa de islu hano minei afilu miyasme. Anything that you have benefit from, they have benefit from, even from miyasme, then even orphans have to pay. If you're getting benefit from it, then everyone has to participate, even the yisomim, even the orphans themselves. Because that's what we said. It's dependent on the benefit that the person gets from it.
You can argue the Rabbanon get benefit by the rest of the populace feeling that they're getting protection, which means you have a Gehillah.
Well, then you always have that indirectly. If you start going indirectly, so then you would argue that everyone ultimately has benefits. Look, you could ask a bigger question in a sense, is that the Gemara is very focused on the Rabbanon, and don't start accusing favoritism here. You could argue that there are other categories, right? Maybe that there are others. How far would this go? Where can a person get up and say, well, I don't need this? That's where it gets complicated, right? Because a person can say, I didn't need this, but you do. And we came into that. We discussed that really earlier in the context of, really in the Mishnah. Yeah, when we talked about how how do you work out how much to take? People who are closer to the city, they need more protection. People who are further away, they're more likely to be attacked in an attack on the city. So
Yeah.
I think there has to be a dividing line somewhere. There seems to be a general understanding that when it comes to matters of protection, the Rabbanon can claim exemption. Even though you're right, technically speaking, they could always
What
say,
about Kohanim?
why, in what way? The Kohanim don't have that protection that the Rabbanon
What about the
have.
Kohanim and Leviim?
They don't have that protection that the Rabbanon have. The Rabbanon.
What is the means of their protection?
The Rabbanon. The Gemora said on Zion Amud Beis, the bottom of Zion Amud Beis, brings various psukim that I saprim l'ma'asem shal tzadikim echol yirbun. That the sand protects the sea, so to the maisim of the tzaddikim protect them. Yeah. Now, again, if you were trying to explain this, to someone, they would have difficulty understanding it. They'll say, "Well, you're mixing in a ruchni idea, an idea of ruchnius with something which is a physical need of physical protection." But you have to bear in mind that certainly in the context, I mentioned this at the time, there's nothing strange about that at all. I think it was completely normal that the lahavdil in the contemporary society that they were living in, they did the same thing. The Persians did the same. I think that they also exempted them from paying these or some or all taxes. I don't know what they exempted them from. Yeah, it's not that that's it's to our ears it sounds strange, but it's not strange. That's all. It's not as even though we don't need to come on to that, but it's just interesting to note that this whole idea of rabbinic exemption is not something which was unique to the Jews. That's what I'm trying to say, right? The idea of there being this exemption from certain taxes for these categories of the population is not something unusual, right? It's not something unusual. But nevertheless, that's what the Gemora says. That's the klal, because they don't benefit. Now, Rabba Ramat Stoka Yasmin de Beibar Miriam. Rabba placed Stoka on the orphans of Beibar Miriam. Amalei Abaya said the house of Bar Miriam. Amalei Abaya said to him, Altoni Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, surely Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda taught in a brayso, Ein poskin Stoka ali Yisomim, afilu le pigeon shvuyim. You're not allowed to impose tzedakah, so it's a very different thing to sort of claim or to be posik, to say they have to give a certain amount of tzedakah on orphans. You don't impose that afilu le pigeon shvuyim, even if it's for the greatest mitzvah of tzedakah there is. Well, we'll see, and that is redeeming captives. So he says, very interesting answer. Amalei responded to him, Ano la'ach shuvinu ka'avidno. So I'm doing this, he said, in order to make them feel important or make them significant, and that is a good reason to do it. Yeah, he's saying it ultimately what he's saying is it's of benefit to them. That's what he seems to be that's what the reasoning seems to be here. That's what the reasoning seems to be. If it's of benefit to them, if they're getting direct benefit, then he said I can impose that tzedakah, I can even take tzedakah from them. La'ach shuvinu is something very important for the Yisomim because they want, they need people to look out for them. So he's saying, well, by doing this, I'm going to make them more significant in the eyes of other people as well. Yeah. Okay. So the Gemora says, Ifra Hormis. Yeah, the next mice in the Gemara is like this. Ifra Hormis, Imei de Shava Malka, Shadra Arnaka the Dinri Lakamid of Yosef. Ifra Hormis, who was not Jewish, and we'll see the significance of that. There's a Tosfos about this. She was the mother of Shava Malka, who was a Persian king. Shadra Arnaka, the Dinri the Kamid of Yosef. She sent a purse of dinarim to Rav Yosef. She said, Lahavi le mitzvah rabba. She gave an instruction, I want this to be used for an important mitzvah. She didn't say what. She said, I want you to use this for an important mitzvah. Yosef Rav Yosef, the Koma Ayin. Rav Yosef was sitting and he was looking into this case. My mitzvah rabba. What is a mitzvah rabba? What's the definition of an important, a significant, a great mitzvah? Amalei Abai says, Midutoni Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. From the fact that Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda taught, Ein poskin stok al yisomim afilu pigeon shvuyim. You can't impose tzedakah on the Yisomim or decide that they have to give, sort of, if you like, enforce afilu le pigeon shvuyim, even for redeeming captives, even for the mitzvah pigeon shvuyim. Shema Minah, you see from here, Pidyon Shvuyim Mitzvah Rabbahi. The Pidyon Shvuyim is a great mitzvah. That's the definition of a mitzvah rabbah. Of a mitzvah rabbah. So, in other words, he said, you're trying to decide what is a great mitzvah. Well, we see that the fact that he says even Pidyon Shvuyim you can't impose on your somim, and the only reason that he did it was because he wanted to make them significant. If you look at Rabbeinu Gershom, interesting, the very, very, very last line of the tiny, tiny print, Rabbeinu Gershom, he says, Anolach, the very, very last few words on the Omid, easy to find. Anolach shavinu bo'ino. What does it mean to make them important? Shiyu chashuvin b'chol dvar mitzvah k'may avihen. They should be as significant as their father in every matters, in all respects of doing a mitzvah. I think I mentioned last week that it helps understand some of the dilemmas of this Gemora, because of this whole sugya, because we sometimes think of Yisomim, okay, sort of the Nebuch, maybe they're in, what on earth are we talking about taking it so significant? You could have a situation where the Yisomim own half the land around the town. So here you have the same thing. It could be their father was a big Baal Stocker, and Nebuch passed away, and Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda is saying, hold on a second, if I don't still organize stocker from them on their behalf, they're going to really lose out, because everyone's going to say, oh look, the father of the household has passed away, and now they're a stingy family, right? So that it was in their own interests. It was in their interest to continue with the stocker in that way. But either way, the Gemara says, you see, it's a mitzvah rabbah, because he says even for Pidyon Shvuyim. Amalei Abai to Amalei Rava. Sorry, Rava said to Rabba Bar Meri, top of the next Omid. Minoah Milsa. How do you know? To Amar Rabbanon. How do you know that which the Rabbanon say? The Pidyon Shvuyim mitzvah rabbahi. Where's the source? Who says that Pidyon Shvuyim, the redeeming captives, is a mitzvah rabbah? Is an important mitzvah. Amalei said because the pasuk says, and it will be when they say to you, say, where shall we go out? Va'omar tolem, you shall say to them, it's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, Koyama Hashem, so says Hashem, Ashelamus lamus, that which those who will die will die. V'ashel acherev lacherev, the sword for the sword. V'ashel arav l'rav, famine for famine. V'ashel shvi l'shvi, and for captivity for captivity. So whatever is later in this pasuk is worse than the one before. So cherev kosher mimoves, the sword is worse than death. The sword is worse than death. I can bring you a pasuk for that. I can bring you a svara. What is that? I can bring a svara. High kominvil, high low kominvil. One is there's this it's like the what happens to the body is worse in the sense that it does terrible things. It's disgusting to the body in the sense that it has a terrible effect. Clearly, the killing by the sword. It desecrates the body. The pasuk says in Tehillim, Yokar be'enei Hashem, it is precious in the eyes of Hashem, hamov sola chasidov, death to his pious ones, in the sense that it is a kinder, so to speak, than the situation of dying by the sword. Rav kosher mecherev, famine is worse than the sword. You can bring a pasuk, you can bring a svara. High komitztar, high low komitztar. So sorry. You can say a svara. What's the svara? High komitztar, high low komitztar. One there's pain, one there isn't pain. So in other words, there is more pain in the sense that a famine you've got that terrible affliction before the person passes away. You can bring a pasuk because it says Tovim hoyu chalalei cherev mi chalalei rov. It's a pasuk in Eicha that the chalalei cherev, those who died by the sword, were in a better position than those who died by famine. But shvi, captivity, is kosher mekulam. It's worse than all of them. To kulu isnube, because a captive suffers from all these things together. If you look at the top, as one Rashi on this, shvi kulu isnube, shubiyado akums la'asos by kol cheftoi, because he's in the hand of the akum to do whatever they want with him. Im lamaves and acherev and rav. The fact that he's in captivity means he's at their mercy. Whatever they want to do, they can do to him. Right? Could be death, it could be the sword, could be famine, and therefore he suffers in all of these respects. And therefore, the notion of Pidyon Shvuyim is a huge, huge mitzvah. There is a paradox about Pidyon Shvuyim, though, and this is one of the main Gemoras about the mitzvah Pidyon Shvuyim. And the paradox about Pidyon Shvuyim is, as we learn from the very famous infamous tragic story of the Maharam Mirottenberg, right? So the Maharam Mirottenberg was captured, and he was held in a in a castle or wherever it was. And as far as I know, the story was that they could have ransomed him for a fortune of money, but he refused to allow it. And the reason why he refused to allow it was because if they would pay that huge ransom, then they would end up, doing it again. They would see that if you capture the important rabbis, you end up being able to gain a lot of money because the community will ransom them at whatever price, right? And that's where these huge dilemmas come in terms of the notion of pidyon shvuim. In the end, he was nifta in captivity, and I think it took over a decade before they were even able to recover the body and give him a kvuras yisrael. And of course, this is entirely relevant, and it's not a shir for now. It's a separate, entire, fascinating but important shir around the whole pidyon shvuim in a modern day context. The dilemmas that arise in terms of Israel. Israeli army. We had that case a few weeks ago, which you may have followed, in the news, when there was that young girl. That in the end, they actually managed to resolve it relatively painlessly from an Israeli perspective, right? But it could have got much worse. You heard about this case? This girl who wandered into Syria. Did you not hear about this? There's a mentally unstable young woman from Kiryat Sefer, of all places, who wandered into Syria. Literally, she was captured and taken to Damascus. And through the Russians, they negotiated her return to Israel. And this was recently, like in the last month or two. It was all done very quickly and pretty quietly. It took only a few weeks because the Syrians realized that she was mentally unstable. She was no secret. Even Assad realized there was not much he could claim for her. But in the end, they handed over a few sheep, a couple of Syrian sheep shepherds, I think, a couple of Syrian shepherds, and $1 million worth of Sputnik vaccines for the Russians. That was what the Russians got out of it. The crazy world of pidyon shvuim. But in the end, they got off to. But when you recall the whole the saga of Gilad Shalit, this was a major issue. Pidyon shvuim. How much can you do in terms of redeeming captives? Okay. So anyway, that's the notion of pidyon shvuim. There's another question here, which is a very fascinating question raised by Tosfos. I'd just like to show you this Tosfos on the previous Omud. The last Tosfos on the Omud, Yosef Rav Yosef. Can you see that? On the previous Omud, so Ches Omud Aleph, Yosef Rav Yosef Koma Ayin Bos. Rav Yosef is looking into this question. So again, what you have is actually what could be a very common situation, right? Someone presents this, certainly, someone will sometimes do this. They'll turn around to a Rav and they'll say, I'd like to give a donation, whatever you think. I want to give it to a big mitzvah, right? Whatever's important, whatever you think is significant. There are halachas around this. The difference here was that the donor wasn't Jewish. The don't, right? So it says, Tosfos asking an interesting question. Vim Toimar, you have the question is, so there's a pasuk later on, the Gemora is going to bring this on Yud Amud Beis. And Yud Amud Beis, the Gemora says that it is a problem. Let me just find this. The Gemara is going to discuss the whole notion of accepting tzedakah from a goy, and the problem is the idea of bivosh katsiro tishalbarno basically means that's right, it's the bottom of the Omid. Basically, there's another story. There are two stories of Ifra Hormiz. One is here, okay. One is over here. You can take a quick look at it. If you look at Yud Amud Beis, there's another story of Ifra Hormiz. There are two stories, very similar stories of Ifra Hormiz. One is here where she said, "I want to use it for a mitzvah rabbah," and then the second one is at the bottom of Yud Amud Beis. Can you see that right at the bottom? 4 lines from the bottom of the Omid, where it says, Ifra Hormiz, Ime the Shava Malka, Ifra Hormiz, Mother Shava Malka, Shodra Arba Mea Dinner Lekami. Have you got that? Yeah? She sent 400 dinar in front of Rabbi Ami, Velo Kablinu. He didn't accept them. Shodrina Kami to Rava Kablinu, Mishum Shalom Malchus. He accepted them because of Shalom Malchus. Now, Shama Rabbi Ami Ikbid. Rabbi Ami was unhappy. Rabbi Ami was unhappy with Rava that he accepted the donation. Amar Lesle Bivosh Katsira Tishal Barna, Noshim Bois Mirasa. So it's a pasuk in Yeshayahu, which basically means when the zechus that they have ends, it drying up. The word Bivosh means to dry up, right? Then the tzedakah that they have merited, then they will be broken. The oppressive rulers, right? They were suffering terribly under the Persians, okay? You understand? And they're saying there's a pasuk in Yeshayahu which says, as long as they keep having zechusim, as long as they keep, doing tzedakah, they're going to keep being able to oppress us. And therefore, how is it that why did you accept the tzedakah? And the Gemara says, Verova mishum shalom malchus. Rava accepted it because of shalom malchus. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Ami mishum shalom malchus. Why didn't Rabbi Ami also? Why wasn't he? Didn't he have the cheshbon of shalom malchus? Very important cheshbon. So the Gemara says, because he should have distributed it to aniyim of the kechovim. So the Gemara says, and Rava also gave them to the ani of the Kechovim. That's what he did. Rabbi Ami de ikpid, and Rabbi Ami had a problem with it because he wasn't happy. He didn't know what had happened at the end of the story. In other words, he didn't know. He didn't finish the story. That he didn't know that Rabbi Ami had actually. Rabbi Ami didn't know that Rava had distributed them to ani of the Kechovim. Now, Now, if you look at the truth is Rashi also there discusses the problem. What is the difference?
What's so terrible?
What was that? What's so terrible?
I was going to say, what's so terrible about Rava distributing the money? He's got the money. Give it to the Jews.
No, because he's worried about. He is worried about giving them extra zechusim. He's worried about the zechus that they will receive for having done that mitzvah. That's the concern.
What's zechus?
The zechus of doing the big.
Where and when? In Olam Haba.
The zechus that comes about through giving tzedakah, which is the main focus of the whole sugya there, and the zechus of tzedakah. He's saying that how can it be? He's saying that if you. Rabbi Ami was upset with Rava because he's saying to Rava, if you accept the tzedakah and you distribute it to Jews, what you're doing is you're giving them more zechusim. That's this, and that is a problem because they will then continue oppressing us. That's what he brings the pasuk in Yeshayahu. Bivosh ketzira tishabana. The breaking will come when their merits dry up. That's what he said. And the Gemara answers that Rava did not distribute them to. He gave them to. He'd give them to ani of the Kechovim, so they didn't have that same. Didn't have that same zechus. Okay. Now Rashi deals with over there, but since we're here, let's see Tosfos. What Tosfos' question is, what's the difference? Here Rav Yosef accepted it, and there he didn't. Right? What's the difference? Yeah. Why is it that in this story Rav Yosef accepts it, and he's very happy? He wasn't even asked the question, and over there, he's very right. And over there, there's a whole big tumult about the whole problem. How could you accept it? And Rabbi Yami's not happy that he accepted it. And this is not even. It doesn't even come into question here. You with me, right? She says, "I like to do you to do a mitzvah rabbah with it." And the Gemara says, "Well, what's a mitzvah rabbah? Mitzvah rabbah is for pigeon shvuyim to redeem captives. What is the difference between the two Gemaras?" Tosfos says, "V'yeshlema the kibbum shum shalom malchus could over Rava to come on." Right? He accepted it because of shalom malchus. The same thing is there. It was important to retain the peace. And just like Rava, I'm just in Tosfos here, yeah. Just like Rava distributed it there to Aniye of the Kechovim, so to here, Podabu Rav Yosef Shvui of the Kechovim, he redeemed with it Gentile captives. Same thing. But this is fascinating. Look what Tosfos says. So this is not. You don't need to say that. Rava accepted it because Rav Yosef accepted them here because of Shalom Malchus. The Kivan She'omar. So, that's why Rav Yosef accepted them here. Okay. The Kivan She'omar litzein lemitzvah rabbah. So in other words, there's 2 points here. Number one is why accept them? Well, that's an easy answer. Effectively, with the same answer as there. Shalom Malchus. Yeah. You don't want to create problems with the local rulers. That's why I accepted them. The question is then, what do you do with them? Here, there's a big difference between the case here and the case there. The Kivan She'omar litzein lemitzvah rabbah. Here, what did they say? What did she say? She said, I want you to do an important mitzvah with them. It wasn't possible to distribute them to aniyim who are ovdei kechovim. Why? To osa lignov das abrios v'afilu daita shel ovdei kechovim. That would be deception. You're not allowed to deceive someone, even a Gentile. You can't deceive. You're not allowed. You can't deceive even an ovdei kechovim. And that's why it was impossible here to do anything other than. That's why here you don't need to come onto the idea of the fact that he was redeeming, let's say, Shavuim who are captives who are Avdei Kechovim. No, you don't need to say that. Because here it would be Geneva Stas. He said, I want to do a mitzvah rabbah. I want to do a mitzvah rabbah. When it comes to the distribution of funds, that's no Geneva Stas. Why? Because they know that we give both. We also give to the Avdei Kechovim as well. Right? They know that as well. As it says in Wavings More in Gittin, Mefanasin in Yakim, Yisrael, Dachi Sholem. So therefore, what Tosfos is saying is that the main difference between this Gemara, and this was the main point really I wanted to sort of bring out of this story and that story, is the fact that since she specified, I want it to be used for an important mitzvah, it was important that he faithfully fulfilled what was actually an important mitzvah. And there was no possibility of doing anything else with the funds. So you see the critical importance from wherever the source is coming from of fulfilling, honestly, the direction of travel of what was intended and what was specified and what he accepted, right? And we're going to see in the next sugya, Mitzvah Hashem, about what the parameters are. This is very, very important for changing the use of communal funds, because that often arises. It's an interesting question about the charity campaigns, right? A lot of the charity campaigns, they end up raising more money, which is amazing, than they set out for. And that's one thing if, let's say, it's all clearly what the pot is used for. But what do you do if you were raising for a particular project, let's say a building project, and you pay for the building? So what do you do with the remaining funds? Now, I know those who are involved in communal projects will say halavai, right? Halavai, you should be in that position. We actually have remaining funds. But nevertheless, it's an important question, Here, he accepted to do the mitzvah rabbah, so it has to be a mitzvah rabbah. Now, look at the end of Tosfos, the last few lines. There was a story in Gemora in Erchin. There was an Arab who donated a candle to a shul. There was no Shalom Malchus, so why did he accept it? Over there, there was like an offering. The Gemara says in he was giving it to a shul. He's allowed to contribute to a shul. Why not? We accept Nadarim and Nadavas. They could bring Nadarim and Nadavas. They could bring Korbanos to the Beis HaMikdash. It's the same thing. So therefore, that's why they accepted it. It's a fascinating and unique sugya, really. This question. Any other points on this? Or are we okay?
Can I ask a question, although it might be tangential? Because what comes to me when we learn this sugya is that mitzvahs l'Yisrael nitnu lasot le'Yisrael. So things like v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is only talking about a ben Yisrael.
It's machlokas rishonim, as far as I remember.
So then how do you know that things like lo tignov, lo tirtzach aren't the same? Or maybe they are.
Well, no. Okay, so it's complicated. The relationship and to what extent, you have have different layers. So you have clearly mitzvahs which are between Yisrael and Yisrael, right? You have the Sheva mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which encompasses all of humanity. So we're clearly not excluded from that, although that's more for the God and how they exactly, right? So it's a much bigger sugya. But it's interesting that you pulled up after L'Reacha Kamocha, because if my memory serves me correctly, yes, the mainstream view is that's L'Reacha. But I'm pretty sure there are Rishonim who learn that L'Reacha is Afilo Avdei Kechovim. It's not clear. It's not entirely clear. I'm trying to remember who. I'm trying to remember who it was who learns like that. Can't remember. I have to remind me when we get there. I'll have to look it up. I completely need it.
But anyway, it's a Rambam. It might be a Rambam. Look it up.
Yeah, I don't remember offhand. Anyway, so look, the notion, the nature of the responsibility, the nature of the relationship in terms of this issue of between being Yisrael or Amim, right, is very complex. But I think what is incredible about this particular sugya and the way and Tosfos' approach, you have to remember the context here. They're considering themselves as oppressed by, right, Shovel Malka by the Persians, right? You see that from the other Gemara. That's why he was upset with him. Why did you accept it? We don't want them to have more Chusim, right? And nevertheless, it's like, the Shura Sadin still tells you, she said, I'm going to give it to a mitzvah rabbi. You got to do a mitzvah rabbi with it. Just, in terms of the weighing up and what to do, you have to do the right thing. Okay. So, let's carry on. So the Gemara now carries on. Right. So now back to the next onwards. We talk about the Kupa Shel Tzedakah. Tona Rabbanon, the Brisa says, Kupa Shel Tzedakah, the Kupa of Tzedakah. So we learn about, we explained that the difference between the different types of tzedakah. We said the Kupa is the basic, like, for want of a better word, is the charity box. That's what it is. That's what the Kupa is. And the Kupa is, what is it? What is the rule? Kupa shel tzedakah nigveis b'shnayim. You collect from people with 2 gaboim, u'mischalekes b'shloisha, and it has to be divided up with 3. Now, what's the reason for this? What's the reason? Nigveis b'shnayim, you have to claim with 2. You can't have any situation of authority over the kihil, over the tzibur, right, with less than 2 people. It's not appropriate for one person to go along and claim authority in that respect. Very important principle. So here as well, that's why you have to have a minimum of 2. And it's divided up with 3. That means you distribute it using 3 people distribute, like the halacha of Dinei Mominus. Rashi says, the second Rashi on the Omid, in what respect is it like, judging a monetary case? Because you have to make a cheshbon, to distribute according to each person, according to the number of dependents that they have. Yeah, Tefillim, the children, really, they're really dependents. Tofel is secondary, right? That's what it is. They're dependents, yeah? You got to work out who the dependents are, and on that basis, you make the cheshbon. Now, Tosfos asks here, the second Tosfos on the Omid, obvious question. Yeah, for the same reason, you should have to claim 3. Why? With 3 people. Why? Because it's not a simple thing, tzedakah. Not everyone gives the same. It's also going to be relevant to income, whatever. It's not a straightforward thing. Why are you going to? He says, it was known the amount of each individual, how much they'd give. Not entirely clear what Rabbeinu Tam means. Maybe there's an assumption that when it comes to collecting tzedakah, it's more obvious as to the amounts. It's more straightforward in terms of working out, or it was generally known. How much people would, I suppose, generally give, especially when if it was fixed. But I'm not sure whether that would change in certain situations or circumstances. Anyway, that's what the Gemara says. Now the Tamchui, the next Gemara carries on. Tamchui, the Tamchui is we translate it again as the charity plate. So the Tamchui was really just trying to find, where do we have this first in the Gemara in the previous. That's right. Rashi says in the previous Omid, the Tamchui is specifically for food. That's what you find in the first mission in Arvei Pesachim, right? Fidim and Tamchui, right? That's what it's a food-based thing. So the Tamchui, nigveis b'shloshim eschalekes b'shlosha. It's got to be, you take 3 people to claim it, and then 3 people also distribute it as well. Shegvuya v'chaluka shovim, because the claiming and the distribution are equal. What does that mean? So Rashi says, every day, as it says later on. Okay, it's a daily thing. That's why you don't claim it with 2 people. Otherwise, you're going to have to go and find a 3rd person to distribute it. It's going to basically cause a delay in the whole system. So therefore, the 3 people go and get the food, and they give the food out as well. So Tamchui b'chol yom. Tamchui, what is the actual, when are these collections made? Tamchui b'chol yom, the Tamchui is done every single day. Kupa me'erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos. The Kupa is once a week, erev Shabbos to erev Shabbos. Now, but there is also a difference in what they're used for, because it says Tamchui la'ani olam. The Tamchui is used for paupers anywhere, from anywhere, but kuppah is specifically la'ani ha'ir. The kuppah is for the people in the city. That's what you have. That's where the phrase kuppat ha'ir comes from. You have the kuppah is for the people, the poor people in that city. That was what it was for. That was the purpose of it. Yeah, that was the purpose of it. Now this is this seems to have been just that this is the standard practice and what was done, right? And what was done. If people would come to the city and they would want some food, yeah, it doesn't matter whether they were resident in the city or not, the tamchi would be somewhere it's like a soup kitchen. It's like a soup kitchen. Yeah, you can go to the East End to this day and they still kept the shop for. Have you ever seen that? It's an amazing thing. If you're ever in the East End, there's they've still kept the original soup kitchen. It's like a listed status where the Jewish soup kitchen was. It's still, the soup kitchen anyone can claim from, whereas the kuppah is specifically for the ani ha'ir. But now this is the halacha I mentioned before. V'rashoim b'nei ha'ir la'asos kuppah tamchui, the tamchui kuppah. The b'nei ha'ir are permitted to make the kuppah into the tamchui and the tamchui into the kuppah. What does that mean? Says Rashi, la'asos kuppah tamchui. That means l'chalek alni olam mirbu alein. So let's say they have a situation where they get a huge influx of poor people from out of town. So what do? So then they can make the kuppah into the tamchui and the tamchui into the kuppah, and they can actually give the kuppah, they can use those communal funds, the people in the city can make the decision to use the communal funds for the ani olam, even though usually they should be only for the ani ha'ir. And they're allowed to change it for whatever they wish. That's a major statement. That's a major statement, right? This is all part of the brisa. They're allowed to change it for whatever purpose they wish. Yeah. Big deal, that. Big deal. So we'll have to see what that means in a minute. Let's finish the brisa. There's a few more lines in the brisa. Another thing that the people in the city are permitted to do is they're allowed to make conditions on the measurements that are used. Rashi says that means to sort of make larger the measure of a saw of the city. They can decide to make it larger, like to make it smaller. They have the right to do that. You can say that, well, the saw of Jerusalem is now going to be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. That's what they can do. And also the prices as well. Rashi says they can fix the prices and they can say you're not allowed to sell wine or wheat this year more than a certain amount, right? You're not allowed to do that this year. You're not allowed to sell above a certain price, for example. Yeah, they can do that. So and also one more thing. And also the wage that's due to workers. That's something as well that they can fix the price. Ulahasia al kitzoson. Now, ulahasia al kitzoson means Rashi says liknoses ha'oiva al kitzas divrayim. They can impose a fine on someone who transgresses their words. Lahasia midostin Torah, to sort of travel them away. Lahasia means maseh, to travel. So it means to move them away from the law of the Torah. Midostin Torah, yeah? They can impose fines. They can impose fines as they wish. Yeah. There is a Rambam here. Just want to see this Rambam on this. Just one second. Let me see if I can just find this Rambam. Just give me one second. You've done it. Tess. I don't know whether I thought the Rambam had something, but I don't think. No, it doesn't add specifically. The Rambam simply says, they can fix the price. So feed a boss of a lechem, even meat and bread, and make a condition between them. Anyone who transgresses, anyone who's over this, they'll fine him, they'll punish him, and so on. So basically, what we're dealing with here are sweeping powers. Yes, sweeping powers for the Bnei Ha'ir. Now let's see. Okay. Firstly, what do you? I mean, does anyone have trouble with this? Maybe it doesn't bother anyone. The fact that you can change it, you collect money for certain funds. That's what it says, right? So you collect money, and you decide the next day we want to use it for something else. Anyone have problems with that? Well,
yeah, they could abuse that power, and they could be up for all types of bribery and corruption.
Yeah, bribery and corruption. It's terrible. I mean, what I'm saying. So, what do you think, Jeremy? How are we going to do it? I mean, what? How are we to understand it?
They have to be very trusted people.
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear, exactly. Well, that's the first thing, obviously, that it's clear the very fact whenever you have a greater power, it's clear that the abuse of power is obviously greater as well. So the fact that they're allowed to do these things mean they have to. There clearly is a high risk here.
That's why possibly you need 3 people in order to ensure that everything is Kudos or Kudin.
Yes, that's a very important point. Even though we said exactly, and I think that's why the Gemora, the next sugya, is really going to go to continuation of this sugya. Really, it's this sugya. It's explaining the brisa. We're going to talk about the source for not lording it over the people with more than with you need at least a minimum of 2 people. What's the source for it, right? Well, what the source for that is.
Who chooses them? I mean, who's how are they elected?
How are they elected? Yes, how are they elected? Yeah, this is a very important. No, this is a very important. These are very important points and questions. I think the Gemara may come on to this as well, but for now, let's just see this Tosfos, which will help us maybe a little bit. But it's the third Tosfos, yeah? They can change it to whatever they want. Nir Rabbeinu Tam, so Rabbeinu Tam says, they can change it even for something optional, something that's not an obligation to give to maybe. Even though there was an Erechin, Haiman de Nodav Shragol Bekanishta, someone who donates a candle to a shul, you can't use it for something optional. Someone gives a candle which has got to be used for the hektish purposes, right? For the shul, not for something totally different. For Omanami Hosom, and similarly we say there, so we say there that someone who says he's going to give a protza to tzedakah, so before it comes to the hands of the gabbai, mutar lishnosa, he's allowed to change, but mishabol yad gabbai also lishnosa. But after it comes to the hand of the gabbai, he's not allowed to change it. He's not allowed to change it. I don't know exactly what that means, because clearly when a person says that he's going to give it to tzedakah, okay, then he's got an obligation to give, right? That we say b'ficha zu tzedakah. I think maybe we'll come to that in the Gemara. When you make a commitment by a verbal commitment, it's a commitment to tzedakah, right? You have to carry that through. But it might mean that the purposes, once the gabbai has reached the gabbai's hands, it must be used for that particular purpose that the gabbai intends it to. Either way, says Tosfos, hocha here, shebenei ha'ir, meshane mosa shani. Here, where the people in the city change it, it is different. Lefichach mutar lishnosa afilu dvar reshus. You're allowed to change it even for something optional. Vafilu bali ad gabbai, even if it's come to the hand of the gabbai. Okay, even if it's come to the hand of the gabbai. So. So in other words, it seems to be that, as I said, I'm not exactly sure why it is the person is allowed, why the person there is allowed to change it in that case before it's reached the gabbai, but once it has reached, either way, we're saying here that even if the money has come to the hands of the gabbai tzedakah, okay, the b'nei ha'ir, the people in the city, are allowed to make the decision to change it, and that's because, and this is the key point, they are the B'nai Ha'ir, right? It's even more than the Gabbai Tzedakah. You with me? We're not really talking about the Gabbai Tzedakah here. We're talking about the people who are the responsibility, they are the leaders of the city. He says, the Rabbeinu Tam himself was accustomed, Rabbeinu Tam would give the money that was collected for tzedakah for the gatekeepers, for the watchmen, because they give them, people donate this money with the assumption, with the knowledge that the Bnei Ha'ir will use them for whatever they feel is right to use them for. So all I'm pointing out, but the main thing I wanted to show you this Tosfos, you see, the main thing I think we see from this Tosfos is it helps us with, Jeremy, your point about sort of the possibilities for corruption. We're not talking here about, one sort of, I don't know, the guy who's the responsibility to collect the tzedakah, can make his massive decision. I'm going to change the money. We're talking about the Bnei Ha'ir. Now, whether that means the whole, literally, presumably means, I would assume it means the representatives of the city, the people in charge. Yeah, I think you'd agree that's a slightly different perspective. No, because they're I don't know. Does that help a bit? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean they are a group of people, a large group of people.
Yeah, I mean, how exactly it was set up, and what exactly the way they could do it might have varied. I mean, you have this concept, the Shiva Tovei Ha'ir, right? The 7 elders, the 7 leaders of the city. There's a section here on Gabbai Tzedakah. 1 second. Let me see. Okay, well, we'll see. Maybe we might come to the rules of the Gabbai Tzedakah later. Anyway, okay. Anyway, let's see the Gemora. Let's see the Gemora. Any other questions on this, or should we carry on? So Omar Mar. So we have a quote from the Brisa. Einos in Srora Salat Tzibah Pachos Mishnayim. You're not allowed to lord it over the community with less than 2 people. Minani Mili. How? Where do we know this from? Omar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Omar Kral, the pasuk says, "V'heini chuas hazahov." They shall take the gold. Is that in this week's parasha or last week's parasha? I was getting confused here. V'heini chuas hazahov. I think it's in Kisus. I think it's asking Eli. What do you think? Because it comes a few times, no? No, because V'heini chuas hazahov comes also Vayakel, doesn't it? What?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's this week's parsha.
You think it's this week? Let's have a quick look. Nice to know. 1 second. Let's just look this up a second. No, I think this one is actually earlier. This is Tetzaveh. But it probably does come this week anyway, as well. The same, almost exactly the same lashon. But anyway, the hein chuas hazov. It says in the plural, srarosu delay ovdi. Right. So that's what the pasuk says. It says they plural have to take the gold. Srarosu delay ovdi. So what do you see? You see that you can't rule over with 2. But they're believed, right? But you're believed even if an individual is believed to be a gizbar. Rashi says, you can believe one individual as a gizbar. He is the one responsible for the finances. Now, that's very important. That supports the view of Rabbi Chanina, sorry. Rabbi Chanina says, there was an incident, Rebbe appointed 2 brothers over the Kuppah Shel Tzedakah. How could he do that? 2 brothers are the same as one person in terms of believability, ne'emonos, right? Maestro Russa, what is the lording it over of the Kuppah? What is that going to do with it? Why is the Kuppah got to do with lording it over people? The Amar of Nachman, Rav says Amar Bavu, and then Rav Bavu, Lefi, because Shemamashkanin al tzedakah, va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, because you take a pledge for tzedakah even on erev Shabbos. You can take a pledge, a commitment from someone. You can take something to make sure so that they're committed to doing it. You can even take that on erev Shabbos. Even on erev Shabbos, that's very significant. The Baal Abayis can say, if you look at Rashi says, Shnei Achim. We see, but an individual believes in Giz. So 2 brothers, with regards to believability, they're the same as one. What is the lording over with the kuppah? You said about it because they can't make a rule lording over the community. I feel about Erev Shabbos, even on Erev Shabbos, the Baal Abayis can say, I'm busy. On Erev Shabbos, he could say, it's too difficult for me. You can even take the pledge on Erev Shabbos. So you see that is clearly a position of responsibility of Srara. And because it's a position of Srara, you can't do it less than 2. Less than 2. Aini surely not, says the Gemara, and I will visit all their oppressors. He says, even on a gabait stocker who oppresses others. So you see, you're not allowed to take a pledge for tzedakah. Lo kashas more is no contradiction. Hoda omid, hoda lo omid. It depends whether the person is wealthy or not. If the person is wealthy and should be fulfilling their responsibilities as on that basis, then there is an ability to take a pledge. And if not, hoda lo omid. If not, not. Then they can't. Then you can't take a pledge. Kiho the Rava achbeiler of Nosen bar Ami as Rava. Forced of Nosen bar Ami, v'shokil minei arba me'al zuzi l'tzedakah, and he took from him 400 zuz for tzedakah, for tzedakah. So that's what he did. This is what he did. Now the Rashi says, Rashi here says, so you see that it's forbidden to take a pledge. Omid is osher if he's wealthy. So we're saying like this. In a situation where the person has the means to do so, and then they can even take a pledge to, if you like, even forced to do so. The Mesiras Hashas here quotes a Rashi in Gittin, Dafnan base, Almond base. Let me just see if I can see whether that explains. Let me just have a look at this. Let me just look this up. Okay. Yeah, Rashi there seems to say, that it's impossible to work out, at least according to one way Rashi is explaining it there, that it's impossible for someone who is not a person of means, who is not wealthy, it's very difficult to work out what they're able to give or not. Whereas someone who has the means, is able to, then it's known what he is able to give in that sense. It is difficult. And Tosfos here, we'll just sort of maybe end with this a quick look at this Tosfos where it says Ach Be'ler of Nosen, because there is another problem here. Tosfos says that in Gemora in Chulin says that a mitzvah saseh shematan schara ksuva b'tzidor ain't based in shomatan mesorim alel. The problem is, how can the based in? Okay, we've seen the Gemara distinction in the Gemara between omid and lo omid in terms of whether they can be forced or not. Where you can twist their arm in terms of taking a pledge from them to give whatever. But there is a fundamental problem with the fact that you have it's a mitzvah. Stock is a mitzvah saseh, and where we have a klal, which is that kol mitzvah shematan schar ksuva b'tzidor. If the Torah gives a reward, right, ain't based in shalmata masorim aleh. Based in down here are not commanded to enforce themselves. And what does it say with stocker? It says posach tiftach es yodcha ki beglal hadavar hazeh yivarechecha. Hashem will bless you. So in other words, why is the based in shalmata? Yeah, why are we getting involved in forcing people to do this mitzvah stocker? Yeah, where the Torah says the reward, if you do it, there's a reward. Based in shouldn't get involved in that case. He says this forcing is not forcing by putting them in chains. It means with words. He brings through several examples of that. That's Tosfos. That's Rabbeinu Tam's first answer. And he gives another answer. They accepted upon themselves that the Gabbai should force them to do it. Maybe they felt they needed that encouragement themselves. He says it's not so simple, because tzedakah has a lav as well. What does it say with tzedakah? Right? There's lavim as well. You're not allowed to harden your heart, right? So that's also why they could get involved. And then he says, it just means they're not punished if they don't get involved. And he brings Yerushalmi as well. So that's how it is. Right. When it comes to other mitzvahs say, there is a greater level of there's a greater level of responsibility. Whereas when you have a mitzvah say where the Torah itself gives a reward, there's no punishment if they don't enforce it. But either way, it is difficult. It is difficult in the sense that you see this dilemma of how far Beis Din can go to enforce tzedakah. I think it's quite striking that that tzedakah is so significant that it could be, as Rabbeinu Tam says, it might only be a verbal forcing, quote unquote, right? But even so, firstly, according to others, it is literal. It could even be more than that. But either way, you see the huge significance of tzedakah in general. You know that you could even, in certain situations, they could even enforce in this way. Any final questions on this?
Just going back to the story with Malka, with the Gemora here and the Gemora later. Yeah. Possibly the fundamental difference is that the Gemora here doesn't mention an amount of money that was actually given. So the money could be an insignificant amount as such, and therefore put it towards a mitzvah rabbah. Okay, whereas later on she gave 400 zuz. That's a big amount. We've got to make more of a bigger deal about it.
That's interesting. Yeah, you're saying that there was a specific amount. So what I mean, that's why that's why
you have to be careful, because of Shlomo Malchus. You know, at the end of the day, she's given 400 dinner, which is whatever it is, equivalent to whatever. You know, you've got to make a big fanfare. Whereas here, she only gave an aronaki, she only gave a purse. Could be that the amount was not significant, and therefore the idea of Shlomo Malchus doesn't come into it.
Right. It was less of Shlomo Malchus, except that then you were saying that here that they did have to. Here they did accept it, right? But the question is, why did Rav Yosef accept it here? That's the only question. Why would he? I see what you mean. That there the Gemara is talking about the notion of Shalom Malchus. You're saying may have only come into it there because it was such a significant amount, whereas here it wasn't really relevant. The only thing is that here I suppose you're still left with that question as to why. You know, why did he have to accept? You know, why couldn't he have just said, "Oh, listen, I don't need to get involved," or at least there's no obligation. Tosafos' problem here is why it would be wrong to accept it. It would be wrong to accept it because they're giving the zchus. Unless you want to say, like what you're saying, that there's a lower amount because it's not. Maybe it was a lower amount, so there wasn't the same level of zchus. It's not. You know, it's not entirely clear. It could be that that's a significant factor and a difference between the cases. Yeah. No. Thank you for pointing that out. Very good. Okay, we'll see you next week. Okay. Let me just do, before you go, let me just do a quick straw poll, because I'm trying to work out. The Monday before Pesach, is everyone too busy for a shir? I mean, I'm like, what? What are you all? You prefer a shir rather than cleaning? You're good for a shir.
Yeah.
I'm easy. What?
Yeah. Shir, please, because then I have an excuse not to be helping.
Very good. Very good. Right. Okay. Very good. So we'll take it. So very good. So we'll have the shir next 2 weeks. We won't have a shir Chol Hamoed because people are busy with family. How about the Monday, the day after Pesach? You don't feel just too well. I'm just getting a sense.
Going away. No one.
What was that?
No one's going away. So
absolutely. I'm flexible. I don't mind what people want. You know, if we're.
I can't see any good reason not to.
Okay. All right. We will assume that we should carry on. I'll see you then in Hashem next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.